Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Grace Breen, and I work at Women's Health and Wellbeing, Barwon Southwest, in Warrnambool on the lands of the Peek people of the Gunditjmara Nation. We are so pleased to have you here today at our very last webinar in the Respect 2040's educational series that was created for the 16 Days of Activism against gender-based violence. Today is, in fact, the last day of 16 days, and it's also International Human Rights Day, which I think ties in very nicely to the theme of today's presentation, which is all about the human connection and community initiatives that shape positive change in this world. For those who don't know what Respect 2040 is, it's a regional partnership of organisations, local governments, agencies, educational institutions, and community groups that are all 100% united in the fight to end gendered violence in the Barwon Southwest. It's a partnership doing impactful work and would actually love to attract new members. So perhaps at the end of today's presentation, you feel kind of emboldened and inspired to take action. So please head to our website, Respect 2040, and sign up. We would love to have more members. Today's webinar will focus on community-driven change, and our lineup of very talented speakers will take us through some everyday actions that we can all take to create respectful communities and prevent gendered violence. The webinar will be recorded. Don't worry, you won't be on camera as our audience, but there'll be closed captions available at the bottom toolbar as well, if that's useful to you. And at the end of the presentation, there will be a link in the chat to evaluate the webinar. I know that they sometimes can be a laborious task at the end of an hour, but please, if you can, we would love to get your feedback. This is the first time we've really done a webinar series, and we actually really rely on evaluation surveys for our planning and funding acquittal and all sorts of the boring behind the scenes work that we do. If we finish early today, we will have time for questions. So please pop those in the Q&A box that will be at the bottom of your screen with the person who you're addressing them to, and we'll do our best to answer those at the end of the presentations. I would like to start today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I'm delighted to kick us off. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers here. First off, though, we're going to hear from Caitlyn Hoggan, who is actually my colleague here at Women's Health and Wellbeing Barwon Southwest. She's a health promotions officer, and she brings previous work experience as a fellow regional health women's health service in Goulburn North East, where she worked with local governments, sporting clubs, and workplaces to promote gender equality. She also has experience nationally at Our Watch, working on the National Media Engagement Project, and also in the higher education sector. Most recently, Caitlyn worked within the health sector at Southwest Healthcare, addressing chronic disease and food insecurity across the Southwest. So she's very well versed in action across multi-levels. Please take it away, Caitlyn.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for the warm introduction, and big thank you to everyone joining us on the line today, as Grace said, for the final day of 16 Days of Activism. From, I guess, our organisation's perspective, it's been a really optimistic and really positive 16 days. So thanks everyone for your contributions and your participation over the 16 days. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which I'm meeting today. So that's the lands of the Peek people of the Gunditjmara and Maar Nation, and to pay my respect to elders past and present, and to also extend that acknowledgement to all the lands that you're meeting on today as well. So today I'm going to talk about bystander action and the role that we can all play in the prevention of violence against women. However, before I move into bystander action, I would like to take a moment to talk about the drivers of violence against women and also the essential actions to prevent violence against women. Because I think it's important for us to have a really good understanding of the types of, I guess, attitudes, comments, behaviours where we would encourage you to take bystander action, but also to have a good understanding of how that bystander action and how these conversations are contributing to the prevention of violence against women more broadly in Australia. I think there used to be a pretty commonly held belief that violence against women was inevitable and that it was caused by a couple of, bad eggs and not so great blokes doing not so great things, and that there was nothing that we could do about it. However, we do know through an enormous amount of international and national research that violence against women can be prevented, and not caused by just a couple of bad eggs, but is driven by an underlying context of gender inequality. And we do know that there are attitudes and beliefs and behaviours and also cultures in which violence against women is more likely to occur. Unfortunately, when it comes to the prevention of violence against women, it's not necessarily a really neat equation where we go A plus B equals C, therefore we need to do X, and if we just do X, then we're going to solve this issue. It's not a chemistry equation. This is, when we're talking about the prevention of violence against women, it is a social science. It's a social science because we're dealing with human beings, and we know that human beings are complex. And we also know that we're dealing with human beings in the context of relationships, and relationships can be complex. And just like no relationship will play out the exact same way, that I'm sure all of your relationships look quite different, we know that intimate partner violence doesn't look the exact same way every single time. However, what we do see are patterns of attitudes, patterns of behaviours, and also patterns of cultures and environments where violence against women is more likely to occur. And those patterns are the 4 key drivers that you see on the screen in front of you. So I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with this, that what you see on the screen here is our National Preventing Violence Against Women framework, and that comes from Our Watch. And what they've found through international and national research, that these are the 4 key drivers in which violence against women is more likely to occur, and the 4 patterns where we see violence against women occurring. So I'll go through each of these 4 drivers and what they look like in a bit more detail. So driver number 1 is the condoning of violence against women. And what that means, or what that looks like, is downplaying, trivialising, justifying or excusing violence against women, or shifting the blame from the perpetrator to the victim. I see this a lot in media reporting, and more so in the past. I think many of you on the call would be familiar with cases of violence against women and murders such as Jill Meagher or Eurydice Dixon. And on both of those events, we saw media commentary that blamed both of those women for those incidents. So we saw comments such as, why were they walking home alone at night? Why did they not have someone with them? I heard police say that, women, you need to take more responsibility for your personal safety. There was not a lot of commentary around the men's behaviour and the perpetrator's actions. I've also seen media commentary where a woman who had an affair and then her husband later murdered her, that there was a lot of, justifying or excusing that behaviour because of the affair. However, I'm sure all of you on the line today would agree that there is no, excuse, or there's no way that murder can be justified. If we look at driver number 2, so men's control of decision-making and limits to women's independence in public and private life, that's looking at, shared decision-making and, gender equality in personal relationships, but also in public life. So if I think back to myself growing up, I didn't see a lot of, decisions in women in decision-making roles. And I also didn't see a lot of equality or, encouragement of equality in personal relationships. So I think about my entire schooling career, and from primary school to secondary school, I never saw a female in a principal role. I've been involved in a number of sporting clubs, and again, I've never seen a female president. I didn't see a lot of female politicians. I just didn't have a lot of examples of females in decision-making roles. Also in private life, so in personal relationships, I didn't see a lot of encouragement for equal and respectful relationships. I heard a lot of comments to, I guess, encourage male dominance, and those were things like, oh, she wears the pants in the relationship, or he's under the thumb. And again, both of those comments being seen as a really negative thing, that if a woman was having more decision-making or shared decision-making. Driver number 3 is looking at gender stereotyping and dominant forms of masculinity. So if you're born a female or if you're born a male, there are some quite distinct and different expectations of how you should behave and how you should present yourself in society. And those are formed right from birth. If you give birth to a baby boy, you'll have people make comments around what a handsome, strapping young lad that you have, and they'll give you a blue onesie. But if you give birth to a baby girl, they'll make comments around what a beautiful, sweet angel you have and give you a pink onesie. And those sort of, I guess, comments and expectations continue on right through life. I think in Australia, there's this pretty, I guess, well-loved and heralded idea of what it is to be an Australian male. And to be an Australian male, that's being the provider, that's being the protector, that's being stoic, that's being strong, that's being really hardworking and doing some really hard yakka. And whilst there's lots of admirable qualities to that stereotype, I think that's a really hard stereotype to live up to all the time. And it puts a lot of pressure on males to have this expectation on them. And then we know that that stereotype can cause harm to men, but it can cause harm to women as well. Again, most of you, I'm sure, on the line, I'm sure would be familiar with the research by the Jesuit Social Services, who have conducted research called the Man Box. And they've asked men around their experiences of living up to this masculine stereotype and what that looks like, and what is the impact on men, but also what's the impact on women. And this Man Box research tells us that men who strongly endorse these attitudes of, what it is to be a man, these rigid beliefs of masculinity, those men are 8 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts on an almost daily basis. They're 6 times more likely to have thoughts of self-harm on an almost daily basis. And we also know this research tells us that men who hold these strongly held beliefs are 35 times more likely to perpetrate verbal sexual assault to women in a public space. And they're also 8 times more likely to have perpetrated sexual violence against an intimate partner. And the final driver number 4, male peer relations and cultures of masculinity that emphasise aggression and dominance and control. To me, when I think of this one, I think of Mitch Brown, who was the first Australian AFL player to come out as bisexual. And in his podcast, when he spoke to the Daily Oz about his experience in the AFL, he spoke to this quite well. And he spoke about how there is this culture within the AFL that really encourages and emphasises this aggression, this control, this dominance. He spoke about how it's, to be an AFL player, you need to beat your opponent, you need to beat the opposition, and to do that, you do that with physical strength. But you also do that with words and to put the other opponent down. And he spoke about that locker room culture where it doesn't encourage vulnerability, it doesn't encourage sharing, it really encourages this aggression and dominance and control. So these are the 4 drivers that we see that play out over and over again, and that is contributing and is driving violence against women in Australia. So these are the things that we need to address in order to prevent violence against women, and the conversations that we would encourage you to have in bystander action. And so these are the essential actions that we all need to work on to prevent violence against women. And you'll see that these essential actions mirror and align with the 4 key drivers. So essential action 1 is to challenge the condoning of violence against women. And I said earlier how I've seen some pretty poor media reporting of violence against women in Australia, but in sort of, I guess, the last recent years, I've seen some really wonderful and positive examples of media reporting. And I'm thinking recently of Lily James, who was murdered at a Sydney school in 2023, and how the media reporting was there was no victim blaming going on, but it was really looking at the perpetrator's actions and how he performed a number of calculated and really thought out actions to stalk and murder Lily. Her father also spoke to the media and said a couple of things around really encouraging people not to talk about men as good blokes that have perpetrated violence, that is quite insulting to both the victims and the families as well. Essential action number 2 is promoting women's independence in decision-making and in public life. And we see wonderful examples of this occurring across the country, but also in Victoria, where we have respectful relationships education rolling out in schools. And we also have the Gender Equality Act, so a number of workplaces taking really proactive steps to promote gender equality in the workplace. Action 3, this is looking at those new norms that foster and that address those rigid gender stereotypes. And if anyone was on the call or the webinar last week, we were lucky enough to have Jackie O'Brien from Respect Victoria talking about their wonderful campaign of what it is to be a man, and really asking the questions around, are these the type of stereotypes that I want to live up to, and what kind of role model do I want to be to my the next generation? And maybe those messages that I got around what it is to be a man aren't so helpful in the things that I want to live by. So that's a great campaign that I encourage you all to check out. And number 4, supporting men and boys to develop healthy masculinities and positive peer relations. There's some excellent work occurring across sporting clubs across the country to really address that and support that healthy, positive male peer relationships. I'm not going to labour on this too much, but I do think it's important to be able to demonstrate that we want to see action occurring across all levels of the country in order to address this very big public health issue. So what you can see on the screen here is a socio-ecological model. So a socio-ecological model is a concept that was developed in the 1970s by a psychologist. And it's been used to demonstrate how our social environments influence people's behaviours and influences our health and wellbeing. I'm sure you would all agree that the type of workplaces that we're a part of can influence our behaviours and our wellbeing. The types of communities that we live in can influence our behaviours and wellbeing, and also the type of country that we live in can influence our behaviours and wellbeing. And those influences can be positive, but they can also be negative as well. And in order to prevent a very big public health issue like violence against women, we want all of these layers that we can see on the screen to be working positively towards the prevention of violence against women, and for all of us to be singing from the same songbook. So I'll give a couple of examples of what's happening in Australia at the moment. So at the societal level, we are having a national conversation around violence against women in Australia. We see Parliament talking about this, but we also see this reported on right across the country. There has been a substantial increase around the dialogue of violence against women in Australia, and I would say that's been a really positive change. At the system and institutional level, we do see legislation and policies in place to promote safety, to promote respect, and to promote equality. An example of this is the changes to Sexual Harassment Act, in which we now see workplaces having a duty of care and to be able to provide a safe space for their employees, and really taking proactive measures to build a culture of safety and respect in which that sexual harassment is less likely to occur. And that if sexual harassment does occur, that it is taken very seriously and those victims are supported. At the organisational community level, we see substantial changes happening there, and we've got Georgia and Nicole who will be able to speak to some of those actions later around what's happening locally. At another individual and a relationship level, this is what I'm going to speak to around bystander action, is that we all have a role to play in preventing violence against women, and these conversations that we have as individuals and in our spheres of influence make a difference and are contributing to a broader culture of respect and equality. So let's get into bystander action, what it is to be a bystander. So a bystander is someone who observes and witnesses an incident of a situation of discrimination. And I guess a bystander might be someone who just witnesses it but doesn't do anything about it. So if we see something but don't do anything about it, that can send a message that I'm okay with this action, I don't think there's any issue here, and that can allow that behaviour or those comments to continue. I'm sure you're all familiar with the saying that the standard that you walk by is the standard that you accept. And if you want to, I guess, be a part of a community group or workplace or whatever it may be that's really inclusive, that's really respectful, it's important for us to be able to call out these types of behaviours and comments. On the flip side, an active bystander is an individual who recognises an injustice and takes a stand and interrupts and challenges that situation. So active bystander is a concept that's used in many sort of, I guess, social injustices. It's used in the terms of, I guess, addressing racism. It's used in the context of addressing homophobia. But today we're going to talk about active bystander in the context of preventing violence against women. It was actually, I guess, this concept was born out of, I guess, quite a tragic circumstance, in that there was a woman in America called Kitty Genovese who was quite brutally murdered. So she lived in New York in a sort of high-rise building complex, and there were a number of, I guess, neighbours that heard her cries for help and the screams and the incident taking place. And none of those witnesses called the police or did anything to stop the behaviour happening. And when the police then interviewed people around why they didn't do anything, the common answer was, I thought someone else was going to take help. I thought someone else was going to take action and call the police. And what this concept is referred to as the diffusion of responsibility, in that the more people are witnessing an event or an incident, is the less likely you are to take action because you think someone else will do it. What we're really encouraging today is for all of you, when you're in these situations, is to be that active bystander and to be the person that takes action. And we also know from research that when one person's taken action, then you're more likely to receive backup and you're going to have support from others. It just needs that one person to have that moment of bravery to be able to take action. Why we need bystander action. So bystander action is used to prevent escalation. So we might think that, just one comment here and there is no big issue. However, it does contribute to this broader pattern, that broader pattern that I was speaking about, that broader pattern of gender inequality. And sometimes it might be a one-off harmful comment, but those comments can, if they're allowed to continue, does, I guess, contribute to this broader culture and to this broader pattern, and it can escalate. So we want to prevent that escalation. It breaks the bystander effect. As I said before, there could be a number of people sort of witnessing an incident and no one doing anything about it, thinking that someone's going to do it. Someone's going to step in and say something. However, we just need that one person to be brave and to take action in the moment. It reinforces the cultural change that we want to see. So the type of workplace community group that we want to be a part of, that enables everyone to participate and reach their full potential, and for these really equal and respectful relationships to occur. Supports victims and normalises reporting. And we also know that it works. There's evidence to show that this can have a really positive impact on workplaces and groups where this type of behaviour is encouraged and expected as well. So let's look at what bystander action is and the types of, I guess, strategies that are available to you. First, I would just like to really implore you to, I guess, have your own safety in mind. We absolutely do don't want to, I guess, for anyone to put themselves in a situation where they feel uncomfortable or they're made to feel unsafe. If you feel as though taking action is going to inflame or escalate the situation in any way, really, don't want to put yourself in that situation. So very much encourage you to make sure that you're doing, you're only taking action if you feel comfortable and safe to do so. And you don't always have to take action in the moment. When I go through these, I guess, the 5 Ds of bystander action, you'll understand that you don't always have to take action then and there in the moment. So the first D in the bystander strategies is direct. And what direct action is looking at is taking direct action then and there in the moment. So someone may make a comment or that you're uncomfortable with or you don't think is appropriate, and there's an opportunity for you to have a conversation with them then and there. And some of the things that we would encourage you to do is to be able to ask questions or to share how that makes you feel. So you could ask a question like, oh, why do you say that? Or why do you believe that? Or can you tell me why you think that joke's funny? Or you could, as again, say how that makes you feel. So it could be like, oh, look, I'm actually feeling a little bit uncomfortable with that joke. Or, I think that's a little bit inappropriate and that's making me feel a little bit uneasy. Share what the impact is on you. It's also an opportunity to bring in whether it be a code of conduct or organisational values, and tie it to the type of, I guess, culture that you would like to see in your workplace or community group. It can also be an opportunity to, I guess, address this in a light-hearted way and to possibly, make a joke, say like, oh, it's 2015, mate. 2025, mate. Don't think that's appropriate in this day and age anymore. Distract. You might not feel comfortable making, I guess, a direct comment then and there in the moment. However, there may be a conversation occurring that you don't want to give any airtime to, and you just want to be able to shut that conversation down. So there's opportunities to be able to distract and stop that conversation from continuing. We've, I guess, delivered this training across the region in a number of workplaces, and an example that I guess we've heard from this is that there was a young woman who was in a customer service role, and that there was a male customer coming up to her and making some comments that were making her feel very uncomfortable. So what the person did in that instant is they invented a phone call and been like, oh, Sally, I've got this phone call. Can you please come over and take this phone call? Or Sally, I need some help over here. Can you please help me in this moment? So distracting Sally and that person from whatever was going on and not allowing that conversation to continue. Or an example could be that you're at a football game and someone makes a sexist comment and you don't want to give that comment any more airtime, so you can distract people by, bringing their attention back to the game and looking at like, hey, Robbo's just kicked that goal over there, and talk about the game rather than giving the comment airtime. Delegating, so that's looking at bringing in other people that may be, I guess, be able to help or have a bit more impact in the situation. So that could be bringing in a member of senior leadership. So if it's looking at a sporting club, that could be a coach, that could be a captain, that could be a president, and really using their influence to be able to, I guess, help you out in this situation. So it could be, hey, coach, I've witnessed these players having this conversation. It made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't think that's the type of culture that we want in our team. Are you able to have a conversation with them about it? Or I actually just want to share this with you and bring it to your attention so you can keep an eye on it in case it happens again. It doesn't always need to be someone in a senior leadership position. It might be someone that just has a really good relationship with that person. So you know that Robbo gets on really well with Johnny, and you might go to Johnny and be like, hey, I've heard Robbo say this a couple of times. It's making me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Do you reckon you could have a conversation with him? Delay. So as I said before, you don't always have to take action then and there in the moment. You are able to think about this, to reflect on it, and maybe come back when you're feeling a little bit more comfortable, have had time to think through and process the information. I myself am generally not so quick-witted in the moment and take a bit of time to think about things. It often happens when I'm washing my hair or cooking dinner at night, thinking, God, I should have said something, or God, I wish I said this. It doesn't mean the moment's lost. You're very able to come back the next day, the next week, and be like, hey, that conversation that we had last week, it made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I just want to understand what was going on for you and what you mean by that. Are we able to have a conversation about it? So very much able to continue the conversation and don't feel as though the moment's lost if you don't say something then and there. And the final action is to document. So you might, this is not something that we're encouraging you to, to video and to film and to share on social media. It's not it. It's more around, I guess, having a record of the behaviour or the incident. So it could be getting out your phone and saying on this date at this time, there was an incident that involved these people and this is what happened, and just making sure that there's a record. That can be quite helpful in the cases of if you witness something and you want to be helpful for the victim. So if maybe you see someone experiencing, some verbal sexual harassment, you can document that and have a conversation with the person after, to be like, hey, I saw this happen, made me feel pretty uncomfortable. I've noted some things down. If you want to use them, very happy for you to share them, but making sure that that victim's always in control as well. Just going to quickly run through one scenario of how bystander action can play out, and then I'm going to hand back to Grace just in the instance of time. So let's look at this scenario and see what are the types of actions that we can take. So the scenario is that an AFL star has been accused of sexual assault by a former partner. A group of players are discussing this at a local club, and one member says she was probably asking for it and has now made this up to get attention. So if I was in that situation, a direct action that I could take would be to, I think, ask questions. I would ask questions and, I guess ask that person that's made the comment, why do you think that is? Why do you think that that person has made this up to get attention? Can you tell me, what's your understanding of this? And then I might be able to share a little bit more from my perspective and be able to say, look, in my experience, I think, it's really unlikely that women make this up to get attention. I think it's actually really difficult for women to come forward and to share their experience of sexual harassment or sexual assault. There's actually lots of barriers around why a woman wouldn't want to come forward, and to be able to just open up a conversation to ask them what their thinking is, but also to share my perspective as well. Distract. I guess this is a conversation that I probably wouldn't want to give a lot of airtime to. So I might distract people in the group and be like, I'm going to the bar, does anyone want a drink? Or, hey, let's go get dinner. Or maybe change the conversation to the game today or the game that's coming up. Just really sort of, I guess, shut that conversation down and not give it any airtime. Delegate. This might be an opportunity to bring in a senior member of the club to be able to say, heard this conversation going on, made me feel pretty uncomfortable. I don't think this is the type of culture that we want at this club. Just want to bring it to your attention. Or again, bring in another ally that could be helpful in this situation. Delay. As I said before, this is an opportunity, if you don't feel comfortable to have the conversation then and there, that you're able to maybe, I guess, have the conversation in the next day, in the next week or so, when you're feeling a bit more prepared or had a bit more time to think about it. And finally, to document. Again, this might be something that you could just make a little note in your phone, date, time, what happened, and to maybe see if this is going to be a pattern of behaviour or a pattern of, I guess, comments that are occurring at the club, and to be able to share with other club members around sort of, I guess, what you're seeing happen, and to be able to have a bit of evidence to be able to share with the rest of your, I guess, the colleagues. I'm going to end up there. Sorry, I've run over a little bit of time. But yeah, I'd like to encourage everyone to, I guess, when you're, I guess, in these situations, to have that moment of courage and just have a conversation with people. I think that's the thing with bystander action, that it doesn't necessarily need to be confrontational. It doesn't necessarily need to mean getting an argument. It's just an opportunity to have a conversation around the type of club, the type of culture, the type of workplace that you want to be a part of, and an opportunity to promote inclusivity, an opportunity to promote equality, and an opportunity to promote respect. I'll hand back over to Grace now, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Caitlyn. That was brilliant. I feel so lucky to have someone like you in our community, kind of initiating these conversations and awareness raising, and we're very fortunate. Um, and so much kind of clear-eyed action for us all watching on today to take as well. Next, we're going to hear from Georgia Linehan, who is the Prevention and Advocacy Advisor at the Sexual Assault and Family Violence Centre in Geelong. Thank you, Georgia. Take it away.
Thanks, Grace. And thank you to Respect 2040 for inviting us here today, and for Caitlyn, your keynote there. I would like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional owners. I'm on traditional owners and custodians of the land across the region, of the lands of the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. I would also like to recognise the adults, children, and young people who have been impacted by sexual and family violence, and the lived experience of people in this webinar and within our community too. So Women's Health and Wellbeing, and Caitlyn here has taken us through what bystander action is and why it matters, and how it's a really key action to address all 4 of the drivers against violence against women. And I'll be adding in a little bit more about how to look at bystander action as an important part of collective action, and how we've applied this approach through our Respect Starts Here program. That's a program the SAFV Centre run in community sporting clubs and associations to create the conditions where bystander action is possible, where it's safe, and when it's shared. So we mainly speak about bystander action as an individual act of courage, because there is so much at stake for the individual. We know that's a really big and important part that they play. But we also know that bystanders need structural support. They need clear norms, and they need collective values to support them and back them up in that situation. And so if we kind of think about it in another way, we can think about that paramedic who's the first responder. They are the courageous person. They're taking the action in that moment, but they're supported by an entire healthcare system and a 000 program that really ensure that they are able to show up and do their best. And that's how we think about bystander action when we are talking about it in a community space. It's really important for someone to speak up, but it's really important that everyone has the support around them and the environment that enables them to speak up and to continue to speak up as well. So through Respect Starts Here, we want clubs and club leadership to see their role as community leaders to lower the stakes for the individual so that they can speak up. So it's not only about that moment of action, it's about the environment that makes it possible. So even with awareness, people often hesitate because they feel unsure, afraid, or unprepared. We know that this is not due to a lack of empathy, it's a lack of certainty and safety. It's really scary when you feel like you're acting alone. It can be scary to think about the social consequences or the personal consequences. And the fear of being isolated or unsupported can really silence the most well-intentioned person. And so it's really, really great that Caitlyn shared the 5 days of bystander action today that can help with people to feel more prepared in that situation. When we zoom out and look at the community structures, that looks like clubs, teams, and leaders. They make a huge difference, and creating a supportive environment where responsibility and courage is shared lowers the risk for someone to take action. And by applying a collective action lens, we as a community have a responsibility to uplift that person taking action. There's also an element of safety we need to consider for young people. When we ask them to speak up in clubs, in schools, in other spaces, but when there's a power imbalance or a physical threat that they may be coming up to, we want to make sure that they aren't dismissed. We want to make sure that the people around them, their coaches, are supporting them to do that, because if they're not, what's the likelihood of them speaking up and taking that risk again? So there is a due diligence we have as a community to make sure that we are sharing the responsibility, and that we are providing that enabling environment and that supportive environment for people to speak up. So to get a little bit deeper into how we actually do that at Respect Starts Here, and apologies, there's a little bit on the slide here, but we run the Respect Starts Here program to support local sporting clubs to prevent gendered violence. All the steps are on the slides of kind of how we do that, but as part of that program, we run active bystander training to both the club leadership, but also to the wider club audience from ages 15 and up. So in doing so, we take a whole of club approach to how we promote an active bystander as well. So we want clubs to see bystander action as an outcome of community support of club values and actions, not just a single act of courage. And so to do this, we build the club's understanding of family violence and the 4 drivers of gendered violence, as well as help them make the link of the club's role in prevention. I've got a little video to kind of talk about that in a second too. From there, we support clubs to identify tangible actions that they can take to promote gender equity and prevent gendered violence. So that's where some of that structural piece comes in. And like Caitlyn spoke about before, it's around things like creating a code of conduct, talking about your values more openly. And then from these foundations, we deliver bystander training to support members to speak up against sexism, homophobia, and disrespect. It's not as easy as teaching people to speak up. We're building communities that stand behind them as well. So this year we were lucky enough to create some videos that kind of will show some of the people who've been part of the Respect Starts Here program and kind of draw on that link between why it is really important for sporting clubs to be a part of this process. I will let them do the speaking now.
Community revolves around the football club in a way. It's pretty special like that, especially in a small town like this.
I love this club. It just has always felt really connected, and a lot of the friendships that I've made through playing netball, and the family-like connectedness of this club is what makes it so great.
As a second-generation Australian, sport was so critical to my well-being. It was a place where I, had a sense of belonging. I think for young people especially, a lot of their beliefs and attitudes and behaviours are often shaped in their sporting club.
When outsiders look at football and netball clubs, really championing gender equality and making sure that it is a priority, it sort of sets the tone within the community. When we took part in the Respect Starts Here program, I think it was a really brave but really positive thing to do, to have those conversations.
In Australia, every 9 days a woman is killed by her current or former partner. 1 in 2 women have experienced sexual harassment.
When we accept violence, when we encourage it, when there's a culture of aggression, that violence goes home with people. It doesn't just stay on the field, and not everyone just goes and walks it off.
So that's just a little bit of a snippet of how our clubs see the kind of importance of creating a really supportive club environment. And in the video there, we have Kelly, who is a really respected leader in his sporting club, and he's been able to really amplify this message that we are spreading, that is, it takes more than just an individual. It takes an entire club to create an environment where people can shift those norms, those attitudes and beliefs, to create more supportive, respectful, safe environments. And so, when everyone has the tools to act, but they also have the support from their leadership and their peers to take that action, we know that they're going to come back and do it again and really help shift the dial and really contribute meaningfully to what our ultimate aim is in the prevention of violence against women and gender-based violence. So we have seen clubs gain a greater understanding of the link between gender inequality and gendered violence and the role of community sport throughout this program. Bystander action takes courage, but it's also about sustaining the community as well. It's our hope through the program that when a club member challenges disrespect, they do so knowing that the club has their back. Respect starts as a community after all. They're the ones that really influence us, and sporting clubs have a really powerful way of doing that. And so I guess my message to you is that recognise the 5 Ds in action. Caitlyn spoke about them. When you see them, voice your support, lend your voice, your presence, and through our collective choices and through this collective action momentum, we can really build safe, inclusive and respectful spaces for everyone to be a part. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit more about what our program's involved and the importance of that structural support around bystander action as well.
Georgia, thank you so much. That was a really, really informative and fabulous presentation. What a contribution. And just also thank you to the SAFV Centre. We just all benefit from the tireless work you and your team do. So thank you. Next, we will hear from Nicole Sanders, who is the president of the Zonta Club in Geelong. The Zonta Club's a not-for-profit group that have the ambition of building a better world for women and girls. Take it away. Thank you, Nicole. Have we got Nicole here to speak from the Zonta Club? We might just give
Yeah, sorry, nerves got to me. I forgot to take off the mute. But anyway, I just want to thank you, Grace, and Women's Health and Wellbeing for inviting us to speak here today. And I've got the privilege of serving as the president of the Zonta Club of Geelong. Today, we're exploring how everyday actions can build respectful communities and prevent violence. So this is inspired by Zonta International's global advocacy, particularly the Zonta Says No campaign says no to violence against women. So the orange theme you see is a symbol of hope and solidarity in ending violence against women and girls. So why does this matter? So violence against women and girls is one of the most persistent human rights violations worldwide, but we also know that change begins with us through small and consistent actions that build cultures of respect. So violence is preventable. Respectful communities aren't just safer, they foster equality, dignity and opportunity for all. Community organisations such as Zonta International help us connect local actions here in Geelong to global change across more than 66 countries. So Zonta's role. So the Zonta Says No to Violence Against Women campaign reminds us that violence is not inevitable. It's a learned behaviour, and what's learned can be unlearned. Communities flourish when respect is at their core. By modelling dignity, equality and inclusion, we reduce the conditions that allow violence to take hold. Zonta partners with UN agencies and non-government organisations in more than 66 countries, advancing women's health, safety and economic opportunities. Our local actions by our local volunteers connect to this global movement, amplifying our reach and impact. Zonta's role in ending violence is to mobilise awareness, advocacy and collective action. Through campaigns like Zonta Says No and the annual 16 Days of Activism, we unite clubs, councils and communities worldwide. Together we challenge harmful norms, honour survivors and demand systemic change. Each year from November 25 to December the 10th, our voices join across the globe to shine a light on violence and inspire communities to act. So everyday actions we can all take in the community to build respectful communities and prevent violence. So number one, speak up and challenge harmful attitudes. This is really echoing what Caitlyn and Georgia have said previously. Violence thrives in silence. When we hear harmful jokes, bullying, or disrespectful language, we must challenge it. Respect is everyone's responsibility, and encouraging men and boys as allies is critical. Zonta calls on men and boys to stand as allies, speaking up when they see harmful behaviour and modelling respect and equality. Male allyship is non-negotiable. Silence is complicity and action is responsibility. When men actively reject violence and advocate for equality, they help dismantle the cultural norms that perpetuate abuse. Violence against women is not just a women's issue, it's a human issue. Men must lead alongside women to end it. Real progress requires strong partnerships rooted in accountability, collaboration, and shared responsibility. Men and boys who speak out against violence promote healthy behaviours and model equality, strengthen global efforts to prevent and ultimately end gender-based violence. These demonstrations of allyship shift cultural attitudes, raise awareness, and accelerate progress towards safer, more equitable societies. Speaking up sends a clear message. Disrespect has no place here. So, number 2, practice respect in daily interactions. Respect begins with listening, valuing diverse voices and perspectives. In workplaces, schools, and families, kindness sets the tone for safety and trust. Respect isn't passive, it's an active choice that we make daily. Number 3, support survivors and believe them. When someone discloses violence, our role is to believe them and validate their courage. We can share our resources and connect survivors to services that provide support. Standing with survivors means offering compassion, not judgment. We need to promote equality in decision-making. Equality is prevention. When women and girls are empowered, communities are safer. Encouraging women in leadership roles strengthens our collective future because it brings diverse perspectives, balanced decision-making, and inclusive innovation to the forefront. When women lead, they challenge outdated stereotypes, dismantle barriers, and model equality for the next generation. US Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it best. Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception. So, number 5, and this is one close to mine and all the Zonta volunteers' heart, engaging community activism. So activism is visibility. So wearing orange, attending events and using social media amplifies our message. The 16 Days of Activism is a powerful opportunity to unite voices globally. Together, our collective visibility drives real change. It's really important to educate yourself and others. So prevention starts with knowledge, understanding the root causes, inequality, poverty, intergenerational trauma, gambling and substance addiction, and harmful norms helps us act wisely. Sharing community resources ensures more people are informed and empowered. Education with everything is the foundation of lasting change. So how do we build a culture of prevention? Consistency matters. Everyday actions may seem small, but together they shift community norms. Small steps create big cultural change. We need to encourage community responsibility. Prevention is not the job of survivors alone, it's everyone's responsibility. Through united action, we build hope and empowerment. And when communities unite, violence can be eliminated. Whoop. So in closing, just let's remember that creating respectful communities is not a one-time effort. It's a daily practice of speaking up, listening, supporting, and acting with courage. We're part of a global movement to end violence against women and girls. Together, through everyday actions, we can build communities where respect is the norm and violence has no place. Respect is not a slogan, it's a daily practice. Violence is preventable when communities stand together. So I invite you to join Zonta's vision, which is a world free from violence against women and girls. I'll now play this short video, and this demonstrates the community actions of Zonta clubs worldwide during the 16 Days of Activism in 2024. Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. Fabulous. And very impressive work globally happening at the Zonta network. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace.
Just to thank all of our speakers today. What a fantastic, informative session we've had. So we had Caitlyn Hoggan at the start, followed by Georgia Linehan and Nicole Sanders wrapping up there. Please share this video with others so we can all share in this collective kind of movement. And we have just had the link shared in there for the evaluation as well as the YouTube. So you can share this previous webinars as well with your networks. We unfortunately don't have any time for questions, but feel free to email us. The details available on our website, and we'll do our best to kind of connect in with you, answer questions, get you involved in any of the work that we're doing or our partners are doing. So thank you so much. What a fabulous webinar that we've finished this series on today. So thank you all for being involved.